Welcome to This Old Town Collector's Edition with Alan Oren. We will be journeying through Long Island history with some encore presentations of This Old Town segments. And this time, our journey will be carefully planned. We'll look back at planned communities, at social experiments that both succeeded and failed. Now, it's not surprising that such experiments should have been attempted on the island. It was seen by many as fresh, undeveloped terrain, as a place to take a chance after years of security or obscurity elsewhere. Most of the experiments were the dream of one man, be it a free-love philosopher, a history-loving philanthropist, or a flower-loving merchant. But perhaps the best-known social experimenter planned a community that bears his name. William Levitt, who died in early 1994, brought life to Levittown. For decades now, this image of Levittown has lingered in people's minds. Rows of houses on one side of the street, then rows of houses on the other. Similar homes lined up like pickets in a fence. But there really have been changes to stop and look at in this not-so-old town. After all, in 1946, Levittown was a potato field until William Levitt decided to grow houses there. His ads offered returning GIs a house in the suburbs, the new promised land, for $7,000, no down payment. People lined up just like his houses, and in 3 weeks, 6,000 applied. Levitt mass-produced, stamping out one house every 16 minutes. But his basic 5 models had no basements, no garages, and unfinished second floors. Still, for buyers, it was a decent deal.
I came from an apartment in the Bronx, so this was heaven.
And for Levitt, who died recently, it was a decent business.
We gave them something that they wanted at a price they could afford, and we made a very small profit.
When buyers were branded conformists, they responded by transforming their homes, even spawning special magazines just for that purpose. So now, few homes are originals, with old latticework and old metal garbage cans. But Kathy Weber does still live in home number 70. How'd you react to the people at the time who were saying, oh, cookie-cutter houses, conformity?
I'd love to see some of them now. These are beautiful homes.
Levittown was also the home of William K. Vanderbilt, Jr., or rather his classic road race. The Vanderbilt Cup race, begun in 1904, became the stuff of racing sketchbooks. Its grandstand was in the middle of later Levittown, and cars lined up from all over the world to vie for the Silver Cup, designed by Tiffany. At speeds over 100 miles an hour, they swerved and smoked across Long Island, while 200,000 spectators cheered or just chewed. But there were accidents. 2 onlookers died, and by 1910, so did the race and the grandstand. On this exact spot was the reviewing stand of the race, so it seems appropriate to review Levittown history here. Levittown is 46 years old, and in that short span, it moved quite a bit. It moved from uniformity to a good deal of diversity. The Levittown model has in fact been exported around the world, and that was the original idea of another town, Modern Times, a utopian community that once held the world's attention. If the name Modern Times doesn't sound familiar, try another, Brentwood, Long Island. When you ride through the side streets of Brentwood, you're traveling through 2 sets of dreams. 2 groups looked up longingly and stopped, as you should, in this old town. The first group didn't call it Brentwood. The Founding Fathers in 1850 bought land for a utopia, calling it Modern Times. They created a town that captured the world. For a decade, it had no courts, no cops, no crime, no taxes. You get there, wrote one visitor, by railroad or by rainbow. It also had no shortage of eccentrics, including co-leader Stephen Pearl Andrews, who advocated free love and no formal marriage, just a string around the finger that was untied when the marriage was. Or co-leader Josiah Warren, whose general store used time money, the labor you owed for the labor received. Oh, and Dr. Edward Newberry, who made Ripley's Believe It or Not for his many professions, including medicine, for which he carried a pill-filled cane. The utopia ended in the 1860s when a national recession closed most businesses and the noble experiment. Renamed Brentwood, the town took to selling its land in ads at $10 down, $10 off if you found a friend. Ads in Puerto Rican papers promised tours.
But they brought you to places that they had really truly like little houses already built, with their little chicken farm in the back, their little chicken coops in the back, with 1 or 2 pigs. And this was so typical of Puerto Rico that they really truly couldn't resist.
Her father brought tile from Puerto Rico and built the first Spanish market on Fifth Avenue. Friends and family brought friends and family, and soon 40% of the town was Hispanic, the second largest concentration after New York City in the state. The Hispanics attained part of their dream.
There was something that they could offer their children. There was something that was positive. There was something that they owned. And that has happened. That dream has been fulfilled.
But some of the dream remained elusive.
It's not been fulfilled because politically we have no power. And until you have political clout, you're nobody.
So a lot of people did a lot of dreaming in the town of Brentwood. Those in modern times watched their dream disappear. Those in the Hispanic community are still hoping for their dream to come true. Now, it's interesting that Brentwood attempted not one, but two planned communities, the Utopian and the Hispanic. Stony Brook, on the other hand, was known for two towering personalities, Ward Melville and William Sidney Mount. And one of those, Melville, remade the town in his design image. Now, the key word here is remade, for unlike Levitt, he imposed a new town on one that already existed in Stony Brook. Yes, there is a Stony Brook from which the town got its name, but two other names, Melville and Mount, gave as much to this old town. Ward Melville was a Perot type of the 1940s who decided to rebuild a town. The owner of Marshall's, Tom McAn, and CVS, he had a compulsion for the colonial era.
He felt that it had a wonderful feel, a warm, early American feel, which is what he was really interested in.
So for $500,000, the equivalent of $20 million today, he built a new colonial downtown.
He wanted to make this a living Williamsburg, and I think he really has accomplished it.
He joined old buildings. He divided old buildings. He bought old buildings like the 1751 grist mill on Harbor Road. It's one of the best preserved early mills anywhere, with groaning grindstone, pulleys for processed corn, and storage for finished product. And his love for the mechanical didn't stop there. He commissioned a giant eagle for the post office that still flaps the hour. And he brought a giant to Main Street, Hercules, from a ship's prow. Kiss its brow, legend has it, and you'll marry within a year. But his favorite toys were his carriage collection, and he founded a Stony Brook museum to house them. Melville also collected an artist, the work of William Sidney Mount of Stony Brook, in self-portrait here. And Mount was of Stony Brook, working in a small attic to become, as one critic put it, the most loyal artist the island has known. More uniquely, he would often take to the road in a glass-sided wagon he himself designed. That way, he'd paint the neighbors. So well, in fact, their descendants say he created an ancestral portrait gallery. Shepard S. Jones, the local fiddler, plays in Dance of the Haymakers. George Freeman, a family farmhand, plays in Right and Left. Even Mount's beloved violin stars in Catching the Tune. He patented its special concave design in 1852. Mount's warmth and wit, like Norman Rockwell's, drew a national audience. And finally, he fiddled his way to the Metropolitan Museum of Art. So while William Mount captured history with an artist's eye, Ward Melville seized it with a builder's hand. And we will be back with two more towns that were the visions of strong men. If you can answer the following trivia question, you've got those towns' names. For more Long Island history, here are some sites you can visit. The African American Museum focuses on the black experience and contribution. The Cradle of Aviation Museum features aircraft from the start of flight to the space age. Garvey's Point Museum is devoted to Long Island geology and prehistory. The Long Island Maritime Museum sails through sea history. Joseph Lloyd Manor is restored to its pre-revolutionary high style. The museums at Stony Brook feature a famed carriage and art collection. Old Bethpage Village has a score of historic buildings moved to that site. Old Westbury Gardens mixes Georgian architecture and English gardens. The Sag Harbor Whaling Museum returns to the tall ship days. Sagamore Hill was the summer White House of Theodore Roosevelt. The Vanderbilt Museum and Planetarium features the collections of William K. Vanderbilt. The William Floyd Estate is the birthplace of a signer of the Declaration of Independence. And the Walt Whitman House is the 19th century home of the good gray poet. We've been looking at towns with a plan, those that were designed with a vision and often by a visionary. In one town, Garden City, that visionary left his mark, but it's not quite clear how much he left of himself. Here's the bizarre tale. If you take a drive through Garden City, you'll find it lives up to its name. Much of it is cloaked in greenery, from lawn to lane to shaded street sign. But Stewart, Alexander Turney Stewart, used mainly greenbacks to start this old town. One of the world's richest merchants, he paid Hempstead $55 an acre for a tract two-thirds the size of Manhattan. Stewart's Folly, it was called, but it was all Stewart's, the hotel that hosted Vanderbilt. The first 12 houses that he rented out, some still standing. Even the picket fence, Stewart's Ribs, still surviving on First Street around a new home. Then suddenly, Stewart died. According to these rare New York Heralds, his corpse was stolen from a Manhattan graveyard. Ransom was demanded and perhaps received, and the body perhaps returned by thieves who got away. More certain is that a cathedral was built in Stewart's honor, and he was supposedly buried in its crypt. Legend has it that if the crypt is violated, it will trigger a ringing of the great cathedral bells. Years later, it was horns that sounded as Sunday drivers honked at planes on the nearby Hempstead Plains, the earliest fields of aviation. They honked at the first airmail delivery, the first skyriders, the first blimps, planes that folded and planes that roller skied. But they honked most of all at the skinny kid from St. Louis who in 1927 bounced out of Roosevelt Field and 33 hours later landed in Paris and in the history books. And yet, Garden City's historian says history is not central to the town.
They like the fact that the place looks good, that the place is well tended, that people are mindful of their property, that they feel at home when they come here. That's what they want. It's a result of history rather than history itself.
Garden City is 123 years old. It was the dream of just one man, and much of that dream is still here. The gardens are still here, the houses are still here, and Mr. Stewart himself may, just may, still be here. One other odd twist to the Garden City story. No new building can be built taller than the cathedral. So when the new Garden City Hotel was constructed over 10 years ago, it had to be depressed into the ground. You shouldn't be depressed, though, by our last tale. It's filled with fields of flowers. Floral Park was not just one man's dream, it was one man's business. And when that business blossomed, to say the least, so did the town around it. Drive down the main street of Floral Park, and it might look like others on Long Island, but notice the tulip twinkling from a sign and stop to consider what was this old town. No, not at the beginning. At the beginning, there were dusty roads and dusty fields. But then John Lewis Childs arrived, and soon Floral Park was a flower. Child's flower and seed business blossomed over field and furrow. Hayden Allen's grandfather started Childs in the business.
And the trains used to stop on the way and slow down, going through the floral park so that people could enjoy the view.
It was a floral park, anchored by Child's home with its fragrant front path, the gardens all around, and a gazebo at center. And Childs cultivated a company town with Childs picnics and Childs grammar school and Childs hotel for visitors, all centered on a flower business with worldwide roots, publishing a monthly magazine, and more awaited a yearly catalog that sold 500,000 copies and put petals on gardens across the globe. Then, when Childs died, so did the business. Soon after, the flower fields were split up, and these buildings sprouted where seeds once had. Looking down from the train these days, you see apartments where Child's home had been, though they're called Flower View. And one remaining legacy is the street names, perennials that survive every season. And another legacy, the three florists still in town. Now, when these people hear that you're a florist from Floral Park, what sort of reactions do you get?
They think I'm a blooming idiot.
But he feels the Child's tradition.
I think that the joy is that in the long run, the beauty of the flowers that we have, help other people go through life.
And the legacy, once forgotten, has been remembered at Village Hall lately. Every tree and shrub in town has been visited and recorded as befits a floral park. It's been over a century since the naming of Floral Park, and though it may not be quite as floral now, some would say it has flowered in other ways. The florist who is a bloomin' idiot, my favorite part of the Floral Park story. And to put all those stories into perspective, to organize these organized communities, we will be joined by Dr. Natalie Naylor of Hofstra's Long Island Studies Institute. When we return, stay with us, please. Here are places to look for more information on Long Island history. Not all of these books, videos, and periodicals are in current distribution, but all are available at local libraries. Welcome back. We've been looking at planned towns on Long Island, in particular how 5 of them came about: Levittown, Brentwood, Stony Brook, Garden City, and Floral Park. To consider why they came about and why some worked and others didn't, we are joined by Dr. Natalie Naylor, the director of the Long Island Studies Institute, and that's at Hofstra University. Welcome, Dr. Naylor. Let's begin by talking about why Long Island seemed to be such a fertile ground for these kinds of planned communities, these social experiments.
The proximity to New York is certainly part of it, and the closeness there, but I think any community depends on the individual, and it's a case of, in each of these cases, an individual with an idea, an ideal, a vision, whatever, and for the most successful of those, some money to invest, which makes a difference.
So you need a dream and dollars.
That's part of why modern times didn't last longer. It was the dream, but not the dollars, I think.
Let's talk a bit about the proximity to New York, which you brought up. After all, there were very influential people in New York, very interesting people in New York. Did they generally see Long Island as kind of a last frontier where they could try things they couldn't elsewhere?
I'm not sure that's the best way to characterize it, because in the 19th century, there were some of those utopian experiments throughout the country, in the Midwest, New Harmony, outside of Boston. So it may have been, for those in the New York area, the convenient one. For Stewart, who was located in New York, he was looking for something close by, and that certainly, I think, is part of what was behind his developing Garden City.
I guess we should explain, or at least emphasize, that those who saw Long Island as a last frontier didn't always see it that way for public projects, but also very much for private projects. So you had the great estates throughout Long Island, the Vanderbilts. One beautiful mansion is now in Centerport as the Vanderbilt Museum. Another is Dowling College in Oakdale. The Fricks, the Long Island Nassau County Museum now occupies the Frick Mansion. So we really are talking not just about public projects, but private ones as well.
Long Island became a Gold Coast, particularly on the North Shore, but there were also South Shore and in the Babylon area, the Islip area, of millionaires who built their country homes here. And it became very popular. And many of those homes that were so large were only used for a few months a year. But that was their plan, and several of them have been maintained now as museums, so we can all enjoy them, which is a nice thing to have.
Let's talk a bit about Levittown. Levittown, I guess, was denigrated very often at the time of its building, as the depths of conformity. How do we see it now? The same way, or has our view differed?
For my money, I think Levittown is one of the most successful of those planned communities. It built for private enterprise. I mean, Levitt was in it to make some money, and there was that denigration of the original, the cookie cutter. It's very hard to find an original Levitt house, as you indicated, because the people changed them all. And the Levitt houses today are, despite fears that they were going to become slums, that's certainly not the case. And Levitt also planned that with parks and swimming pools, and I think he was trying to create neighborhoods in a community. And most of the Levittowners are very enthusiastic. When he came back for the anniversary, he was the founding father, and they loved him. It's the intellectual critics, I think, who were the ones who were making those carping criticisms, and I'm not so sure that all that holds out today.
Interesting. So those who were viewing from without rather than those who were living within are the ones who are criticizing.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about sort of an odd issue that arose in Brentwood. Here was a community that targeted a particular ethnic group, and I mean this positively, the Hispanics, the Puerto Ricans, to bring them to a particular community. How often has that happened on Long Island?
Maybe not as targeted, but in Westbury, for example, there are many Italians there from the same community in Italy, because people came and settled where their friends and neighbors had settled. So that you have different communities where there have been a concentration of ethnic groups. And it's not always as targeted as Brentwood when there were advertisements, I guess, placed, but a lot of it is word of mouth also. And people learn about the community. And so some of the communities that become Breslau was Lindenhurst, was a German community originally. And
yeah, I guess a lot of it is informal attraction.
Mm-hmm.
The other example I think of is Amityville, where one of the first, if not the first, African-American church was established, I believe by freed African-Americans from Shelter Island. Well, it was natural once that was established for other African-Americans to form a community there. Let's talk about the future. What kind of chance do we have for planned communities now or in the future on Long Island?
There's not a lot of land left. That's the other thing you need, is undeveloped land, because Melville was the only one who was able to, could afford to take established land and do something with it. And given the protection of the pine barrens and so on, you don't have large plots, I suspect. So I'm not sure that we're going to see other communities. There have been others elsewhere. I mean, Reston is relatively recent in the Maryland, Washington, D.C. area. But I don't anticipate that we're going to find more on Long Island.
Let me end with sort of a personal anecdote, I guess. When I was in Floral Park, I asked 7 or 8 people on the street, what is the origin of the particular name Floral Park? Maybe one knew that it was related to flowers and to a flower factory early on. Do you find that kind of an approach by many Long Islanders, that they don't really know that much about the early origins of their towns?
I suspect that's true, though I hope your program is changing some of that. And at the Long Island Studies Institute, we hope to increase the awareness of Long Island history and local history. It's being taught in 4th grade, and but people move around, so they didn't necessarily grow up here and know that.
We thank you very much, Dr. Naylor. We appreciate it, and we thank you for sharing your vision of these visionary towns. Thanks to our viewers, whose vision we hope has been broadened by our look at planned communities, and our thanks to those who helped create this Old Town Collector's Edition.